The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had never seen such fear. Representatives from 347 different worlds sat in their floating chairs, and every single one of them was afraid. The air itself seemed thick with terror. Senator Crixtall from the Andorian Empire could not stop his forearms from shaking. His blue skin had turned pale gray, and his antennae drooped down like dying plants. Next to him, Ambassador Yelani from the Crystal Worlds made soft clicking sounds that meant deep worry in her language. Above them all, the ancient ethereals floated in their energy forms. These beings were older than most stars. They had seen the birth and death of entire civilizations. But today, even they were afraid. Senior Ethereal Zix then spoke with a voice that sounded like wind through crystal caves. My fellow beings of the galaxy, we face a darkness we hoped was only legend. The massive screen behind the ethereals came to life. It showed star maps of the outer rim sectors. Where there should have been bright points of light showing star systems, there was only empty black space. The Void Hunters have returned, Zix then said. A wave of panic swept through the hall. Some delegates made prayer gestures. Others began crying in their own ways. The Veltar engineers started calculating frantically on their data tablets, as if numbers could somehow make this nightmare go away. 3 sectors are gone, Zix then continued. Not destroyed, gone. The Helix Nebula, the twin stars of Morin. The entire outer Cygnus arm, consumed. Nothing remains where they once were. Representative Gorth from the warrior clans stood up on his 6 legs. His voice was a deep growl. How many ships? What weapons did they use? How can we fight them? Zix then's energy form dimmed with sadness. You do not understand, warrior. They sent only 1 ship to each sector. 1 ship destroyed everything in 3 solar systems. Our combined fleets attacked it with everything we had. Quantum torpedoes, plasma cannons, gravity bombs. Nothing worked. The ship absorbed our energy weapons and kept growing stronger. The Krethok poet warrior Velashti spoke up. Then we fight with honor and die with dignity. It is better than living in fear. You cannot fight something that eats space itself, Zix then replied. The Void Hunters do not just destroy matter. They consume reality. Where they pass, even empty space dies. Time stops flowing. The laws of physics break down. On the screen, new images appeared. They showed the aftermath of the Void Hunter attacks. There should have been debris, radiation, something left behind. Instead, there was perfect emptiness. Not dark matter or empty space, but true nothingness. How is this possible? Asked Dr. Zen from the Science Coalition. Matter and energy cannot simply vanish. They are not from our reality, Zix then explained. They come from the spaces between universes. They feed on the fabric of existence itself. Every atom they consume makes them stronger. The hall erupted in frightened chatter. Some delegates were already making calls to their home worlds, telling them to prepare for evacuation. Others sat in shocked silence. Zix then raised his energy form higher, calling for quiet. There is only one choice left to us. We must fall back to the core worlds. Build a defensive line around the galactic center. Abandon everything beyond the middle rim. That means giving up half the galaxy, shouted Ambassador Keth from the Trade Federation. Half the galaxy, or all of it, Zix then said simply. Those are our choices. The vote was called quickly. One by one, the delegates voted yes. The Ethereals voted yes. The warrior clans voted yes. The Science Coalition voted yes. Even the proud Veltar, who had built most of the galaxy's greatest structures, voted to abandon their outer colonies. As the votes were counted, a small light blinked on the bottom of the screen. Someone had abstained from voting. The representative from Sol Sector abstains? Zix then asked, surprised. Most delegates had forgotten there was even someone from that small, distant sector. A figure stood up in the back of the hall. She was short compared to most of the other delegates. Her skin was a light brown color, and she had dark hair pulled back. Her clothes were simple and practical, She wore no fancy robes or symbols of office. "Ambassador Chen from Seoul Sector," she said in a calm voice. "I abstain because I need to contact my government before making this decision." Several delegates laughed nervously. What could one tiny sector possibly do that the combined might of galactic civilization could not? Zixthan's form flickered with annoyance. "Ambassador Chen, we appreciate your sector's input. But time is critical. The Void Hunters advance every day. We must begin evacuations immediately." Chen nodded politely. "I understand. Senior Ethereal. I request 12 hours to speak with Earth Central Command. Then we will give our answer." 12 hours? Senator Krixtal spoke up. "The evacuation fleets need to launch now. Every moment we delay costs lives." Chen looked around the hall with calm eyes. 12 hours, that is all I ask." Zix then considered this. Seoul Sector was small and distant. They had joined the Galactic Council only 50 years ago, and had mostly kept to themselves since then. What harm could 12 more hours do? "Very well," Zix then said. 12 hours. But then the evacuation begins. With or without Seoul Sector. Chen bowed slightly. "Thank you, Senior Ethereal. That will be enough." As the session ended, and delegates hurried away to prepare for the greatest retreat in galactic history, few paid attention to the small human woman walking calmly toward the exit. If they had looked closely, they might have noticed that she was not afraid like everyone else. Her eyes held something different. Something that might have been hope, or might have been something much more dangerous. In the empty hall, only the ethereals remained, their energy forms dim with exhaustion and fear. What can one small sector possibly do? Zix then wondered aloud. None of them knew that in 12 hours, they would have their answer, and it would change everything they thought they knew about the galaxy. The evacuation began at dawn on 1,000 worlds. On Veltara Prime, the greatest engineers in the galaxy worked without sleep. Their massive construction ships flew between the outer planets, building fortress stations as fast as their machines could work. Master Engineer Colvin watched the work through tired eyes. "Faster!" he called to his teams. The defensive platforms must be ready before the Void Hunters reach the middle rim. But even as his workers built their strongest defenses, Colvin knew it was useless. If the combined fleet of the galaxy could not stop one Void Hunter ship, what good would fixed defenses do? On the war world of Krethal, the poet warriors gathered in their great halls. They sang death songs that had not been heard for 1,000 years. Elder Velashti stood before her people, her 6 eyes wet with tears. "We do not run from death," she told them, "but sometimes we must run to save others. The children and the weak go first. The warriors stay until the end." Young warriors stamped their feet and cried out in agreement. They would rather die fighting than live in fear. But orders were orders, and their duty was to protect life, not throw it away in useless battle. On the crystal worlds of Chardon, the great thinkers worked their probability machines. Numbers flowed across crystalline displays, in patterns too complex for most minds to follow. But every calculation showed the same result. 97.4% chance of total galactic extinction, announced Senior Calculator Prismdoll. Even if we successfully retreat to the core worlds, the Void Hunters will eventually break through our defenses. The other crystals made ringing sounds of despair. They were beings of pure logic, and the logic was clear. Nothing they could do would stop what was coming. Across the galaxy, massive ships launched from spaceports. These were not warships, but evacuation vessels. Enormous cargo ships, designed to carry millions of beings at once. Families torn apart by the sudden evacuation cried as they boarded. Many would never see their homeworlds again. The ethereals coordinated everything from their ancient space stations. Their energy forms darted between star systems at the speed of thought, making sure the evacuation proceeded in order. But even they could feel the growing panic. On board the evacuation ships, different species huddled together. The proud Andorians sat next to the quiet Zephyrans. Children of a dozen races played together while their parents watched the stars, wondering if they would live to see another day. "Look," said a young Veltar child, pointing at a view screen. "The pretty lights are going out." Her mother pulled her away from the window, but the child was right. Behind them, whole star systems were winking out of existence, one by one. The Void Hunters were still advancing, and they were getting faster. In the command center of the evacuation fleet, Admiral Gorth studied the tactical displays. His warrior's mind tried to find some way to fight back, but there was nothing. The Void Hunters' ships seemed to exist outside normal space. They could not be tracked properly, and they appeared wherever they wanted. "Admiral," called his communications officer. "We're receiving a strange transmission." "From where?" "Sol sector, sir. It's just repeating the same message over and over." Gorth frowned. Sol sector was far from the main evacuation routes. What were those isolated beings doing while the galaxy burned? "Put it through." A calm voice filled the bridge. It spoke in perfect galactic standard, but with a strange accent that none of them recognized. "This is Earth Central Command to all ships in the Outer Rim. Please clear the following sectors immediately: Gamma 7, Delta 9, and Epsilon 4. Repeat, all ships clear Gamma 7, Delta 9, and Epsilon 4. You have 6 hours to reach minimum safe distance of 50 light-years." The message ended and began repeating. Gorth looked at his tactical officer. "Those sectors are directly in the path of the Void Hunters. Why would anyone want ships to stay away from there?" "Unknown, sir. Should we relay the message to the evacuation fleet?" Before Gorth could answer, another transmission came through. This time, it was Ambassador Chen's voice. "Admiral Gorth, this is Ambassador Chen. Please trust us and follow our evacuation instructions. Keep your ships at least 50 light-years away from the sectors we mentioned. What you are about to see may be disturbing to some species." "Disturbing?" Gorth muttered. "More disturbing than watching the galaxy get eaten?" His communications officer looked up from her station. "Sir, I'm detecting massive energy buildups in Sol sector. Whatever they're doing, it's big." Meanwhile, in the crystal cities of Shardan, senior calculator Prismdoll noticed something strange in her probability calculations. A new factor had appeared in the equations, something she had never seen before. "This is impossible," she said to her assistant. "The calculations are changing. There's a new variable I cannot identify. What does it represent?" "I do not know. It appears to be coming from Sol sector. But there are only humans there. And they have been quiet since joining the Council. What could they possibly be doing that would affect galactic probability matrices?" Across the evacuating fleets, similar conversations were happening. The ethereals sensed strange disturbances in space-time around Sol sector. The Veltar engineers detected energy readings that made no sense with known technology. Even the warrior clans felt something stirring, a feeling like the moment before a great battle, but Ambassador Chen said nothing more. She simply sat in her small ship, watching the countdown timer on her console. 11 hours and 37 minutes since the Council vote, 23 minutes until Earth Central Command gave their answer. Around her, the greatest evacuation in galactic history continued. Trillion of beings fleeing toward the core worlds, abandoning everything they had built in the outer systems. But in the depths of Sol sector, something else was happening, something that none of them understood yet. The Void Hunters continued their advance, consuming everything in their path. They had no idea that they were being watched. They did not know that somewhere in the darkness of space, ancient calculations were being made. Plans that had been prepared for decades were finally being put into action. The galaxy held its breath and waited. Soon, they would all learn what the humans had been doing during their 50 years of silence. Dr. Zen could not sleep. While the evacuation fleets continued their desperate flight toward the core worlds, the scientist sat in her laboratory, searching through the Council's databases. She needed to understand what Sol sector was planning. "Computer, show me all information about Sol sector and the species called humans." The holographic display came to life. But what appeared made no sense. The file was surprisingly small for a spacefaring civilization. "Only 50 years of contact?" Zen muttered. "How is that possible?" "041. She read through the first contact reports. A small exploration ship had detected radio signals from a single star system in the Outer Rim. When they investigated, they found something that shocked them. Classification: Death World, Class 12, she read aloud. Warning: extreme caution advised. Gravity 2.5 times galactic standard. Atmospheric composition toxic to most species. Weather systems of unusual violence. Zen's tentacles curled with confusion. Death worlds were rare, and Class 12 was almost unheard of. Most beings could not survive more than a few minutes on such a planet. Yet somehow, these humans had not just survived there, they had thrived. Computer, show me the planet called Earth. The image that appeared made Zen gasp. It was a blue and green world that looked almost beautiful from space. But the data told a different story. Crushing gravity that would flatten most species. Air filled with a gas called oxygen that is highly reactive and poisonous to many life forms. Weather systems that include massive storms, floods, droughts, and temperature swings that would kill most galactic citizens in minutes. But that was not the worst part. Earth was not just dangerous. It was actively trying to kill everything on it. The planet had predatory animals that hunted for sport, plants that could poison or eat other living things, even tiny organisms called bacteria that could destroy a body from the inside. How does anything survive on that nightmare world? Zen wondered. She dug deeper into the files. What she found made her more confused. Humans did not just survive on Earth. They had somehow spread to every planet and moon in their star system, even places that should have been impossible to live. They built colonies inside gas giants, on the surface of planets that face their sun. How is this possible with their level of technology? The answer, when she found it, was disturbing. Humans did not use advanced technology to survive in these places. They changed themselves. They wore simple protective suits and breathing equipment. But mostly, they just adapted to conditions that would kill any other known species. But the most shocking discovery came when she read about human history. Computer, show me human warfare records. What appeared on the screen was beyond anything Dr. Zen could understand. These beings had not just fought with each other. They had been in constant war for their entire existence, not just with other humans, but with their own planet. They survived ice ages that lasted thousands of years, asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions that covered their entire world in ash. The records showed that humans had nearly gone extinct dozens of times. But each time, they survived and came back stronger. They had developed something called genetic bottlenecks. Times when their entire species was reduced to just a few thousand individuals. Any other species would have died out. Humans used these disasters to become tougher. Dr. Zen read about something called recreational activities. These were things humans did for fun. The list made her sick. They deliberately jump from high places with only fabric to slow their fall. They climb mountains where the air is too thin to breathe. They swim in waters filled with predatory creatures that can tear them apart. But that was not even the strangest part. Humans seemed to enjoy putting themselves in danger. They called it extreme sports. They would race vehicles at deadly speeds, fight each other in organized combat, and explore places that could kill them just for the challenge. This cannot be real, Zen said to herself. No sane species behaves this way. But the files continued. Humans had something called military history that went back thousands of years. They had fought wars with weapons that could destroy entire cities. They had developed ways to kill that were so effective, they had to make agreements to stop using them. They invented weapons so dangerous they scared themselves. The database showed images of human soldiers. They did not look like warriors. They were smaller than most galactic species, with soft skin and no natural armor. But they carried weapons and wore equipment that looked crude but effective. They fight using kinetic weapons, projectiles fired by chemical explosions. How primitive. But as Dr. Zen read more, she realized it was not primitive. It was practical. Human weapons did not rely on complex energy systems that could fail. They used simple physics. A piece of metal flying very fast would punch through almost anything, and there was no way to block or absorb it, like energy weapons. Across the galaxy, Other curious beings were making similar discoveries. On the engineering ships, the Veltar found records of human construction projects. They built cities in places where earthquakes happen regularly, engineer Colvin reported to his team. When the buildings fall down, they simply build them again, but stronger. The Krethak warriors discovered human military tactics. They do not fight with honor, reported warrior poet Velashti. They fight to win. They use tricks, traps, and ambush attacks. They show no mercy to enemies. That sounds terrible, said one of her students. No, Velashti replied slowly. That sounds effective. The ethereals began to understand why Sol Sector had been so quiet for 50 years. They were not hiding from us, Senior Ethereal Zix then realized. They were studying us. Learning about every species, every technology, every military capability in the galaxy. But why? Asked another ethereal. Because that is what predators do. They watch and learn and wait for the right moment to strike. As the 12-hour deadline approached, beings across the galaxy were reaching the same terrible understanding. Humans were not just another spacefaring species. They were something completely different, something that should not exist by any law of galactic civilization. They were survivors, killers, creatures born from a world so dangerous that it had forged them into something no other species could understand. And now, with the Void Hunters consuming the galaxy, these predators from the dark were finally ready to emerge from the shadows. The countdown timer reached 0. It was time for Earth Central Command to give their answer. The space around the evacuation fleets suddenly twisted. Admiral Gorth felt it first. A strange pulling sensation in his stomach as reality bent around his ship. On every vessel in the fleeing armada, instruments went wild. Gravity fluctuated. Time seemed to skip like a damaged recording. Admiral, his tactical officer called out. Multiple spatial distortions detected. Something big is coming out of hyperspace. Void Hunters? Gorth demanded. Negative, sir. The energy signatures are completely different. Then they appeared. Ships began emerging from the darkness of space, but these were unlike anything the galactic species had ever seen. Where their vessels were smooth and elegant, built for efficiency and beauty, these new ships looked like they were built for war. They were angular and brutal. Thick armor plates covered their hulls. Weapons bristled from every surface. They did not gleam like polished metal. They were dark, gray, and black, designed to blend with the emptiness of space. Impossible, breathed Gorth. How many ships are there? 1. His tactical officer's voice was shaking. I count over 10,000 vessels, sir. And more are still arriving. I count over 10,000 vessels. The largest ship was massive, easily 3 times the size of a galactic dreadnought. Its hull was scarred with what looked like battle damage, but the scars were old. This ship had seen many fights and survived them all. A communication came through on all frequencies. The voice was calm and human. This is Admiral Rebecca Santos of the Terran Defense Force, commanding the TDF Indomitable. All galactic vessels maintain current course and speed. Move to minimum safe distance of 50 light-years and observe. We've got this. Admiral Gorth looked around his bridge. His officers stared back at him with confusion. Did they just tell us they can handle the Void Hunters? Asked his communications officer. Before Gorth could respond, alerts began screaming across every sensor array. The Void Hunters had arrived. 3 massive black shapes appeared at the edge of the system. They were not ships in any sense that galactic species understood. They looked more like holes in reality. Dark wounds in space that hurt to look at directly. The Void Hunters, someone screamed across the comm channels. All ships retreat immediately, but the human ships did not retreat. Instead, they did something that shocked every watching alien. They attacked. Are they insane? Gorth whispered. The human ships spread out in a formation that made no sense by galactic military doctrine. Instead of presenting a unified front, they scattered like a pack of hunting animals. Some ships moved to flank the Void Hunters. Others dove directly at them in what looked like suicide runs. The Void Hunter ships responded as they always did. Waves of dark energy lashed out. The same attacks that had destroyed the combined galactic fleet without effort. Energy that could tear apart the fabric of space itself reached for the human vessels, and nothing happened. Impossible! Dr. Zen gasped from her observation post. The Void Hunter's weapons should have destroyed them instantly, but the human ships flew through the dark energy as if it was not there. Their crude-looking hulls absorbed hits that would have vaporized any galactic vessel. How are they doing that? Demanded Engineer Colvin. The answer came when he analyzed the sensor readings. Human ships were not using energy shields like every other spacefaring species. They were using something much simpler and much more effective. They were built to take damage. Their hulls were incredibly thick layers of simple metal and ceramic. No exotic materials, no complex force fields, just armor so heavy and basic that exotic energies could not affect it properly. They fight like their planet, Dr. Zen realized. They don't try to avoid damage. They simply survive it. The human fleet opened fire, and the watching aliens gasped again. No energy weapons, no plasma cannons or quantum torpedoes. The humans were using kinetic weapons, massive railguns that fired solid projectiles at incredible speeds. Chunks of metal, some as large as shuttlecraft, slammed into the Void Hunter ships at a significant fraction of light speed. The dark vessels, which had absorbed every energy attack thrown at them, suddenly found themselves being physically torn apart. Brilliant, whispered Velashti from her warrior ship. Energy can be absorbed or deflected. But matter, moving at those speeds, follows simple physics. It punches through anything. But the humans were just getting started. When one of the Void Hunters began to consume a human destroyer, something unprecedented happened. Instead of trying to escape or calling for help, the human ship did something that froze the blood of every watching alien. It rammed the Void Hunter. "No," Admiral Gorth shouted, as if he could somehow warn them. "You can't fight them in close combat." But the human ship had loaded itself with something called antimatter charges. When it hit the Void Hunter, the explosion was visible from 50 light-years away. Did they just sacrifice their ship on purpose? Asked a Veltar engineer. Suicide attack, confirmed Velashti with something like admiration in her voice. The humans are fighting like warriors who understand that some things are worth dying for. But what happened next showed that the humans understood more than just sacrifice. As the Void Hunter reeled from the antimatter explosion, human Marines in combat armor teleported directly onto its hull. "They're boarding a Void Hunter ship," someone screamed over the comm channels. "They'll be consumed instantly." But the humans were not consumed. Their armor was just as crude and practical as their ships, thick plates of metal and ceramic that somehow resisted the Void Hunter's reality-eating abilities. They planted more charges and teleported away, just before the explosions tore the alien vessel apart. One by one, the Void Hunter ships were systematically destroyed. Not through superior technology or overwhelming firepower, but through tactics that no civilized species would ever consider. The humans fought dirty. They used tricks and traps and ambushes. They seemed to understand their enemy in a way that sophisticated galactic civilization never could. "They recognize what the Void Hunters are," Dr. Zen said quietly. "They're predators, fighting other predators." When the last Void Hunter ship exploded, the human fleet regrouped. Admiral Santos's voice came across the comm channels again. "Galactic Command, this is Admiral Santos. Immediate threat neutralized. Estimate 36 hours until cleanup operations complete. Recommend you maintain safe distance until we signal all clear." Admiral Gorth finally found his voice. "Admiral Santos, how did you do that? Our combined fleets couldn't even damage those ships." There was a pause before the human replied. "You fight like civilized beings, Admiral. You use sophisticated weapons and elegant tactics. The Void Hunters can counter that because they're from outside our reality. They don't understand crude and simple. But how did you know?" Another pause. "Because we've dealt with their kind before. In the dark spaces beyond Sol Sector, there are things that make the Void Hunters look friendly. We've been fighting them for decades." The implications hit every listening alien at the same moment. While the galaxy had enjoyed peace and prosperity, the humans had been standing guard at the edge of known space, fighting horrors that the rest of civilization could not even imagine. "Why?" asked Admiral Gorth. "Why didn't you tell us? Would you have believed us? And more importantly, would you have been able to help? No offense, but your ships would have been consumed in the first 30 seconds of a real fight out there." As cleanup operations began, the watching aliens saw humans doing something else impossible. They were entering the zones where space-time had been damaged by the Void Hunters, places where reality itself had been partially consumed. "They're repairing space-time," whispered Dr. Zen in amazement. "How is that possible?" But the humans just went about their work with the same calm professionalism they had shown in battle. To them, fixing holes in reality was apparently just another job that needed doing. The galaxy had been saved. But now they all understood something that would change everything. The small, quiet sector they had barely noticed was home to beings that could fight gods and repair the universe itself. And they had been doing it alone for 50 years. 3 days later, the Galactic Council met again. But this time, everything was different. The Great Hall was still full of representatives from hundreds of worlds. But the fear was gone. In its place was something else. A mixture of awe, confusion, and concern. Everyone kept looking at the small human woman sitting calmly in the back row. Ambassador Chen had not changed. She still wore simple clothes and carried herself without ceremony. But now every being in the hall knew what she represented. The sight of her made some delegates nervous. Senior Ethereal Zyxthan floated above the assembly, his energy form brighter than it had been in years. The terror was gone from his voice. "The immediate crisis has passed," he announced. "The Void Hunters have been eliminated, and our worlds are safe. We owe a debt to Sol Sector that can never be repaid." A wave of agreement swept through the hall. Species that had never agreed on anything before were united in their gratitude. But gratitude mixed with questions. Senator Krixtal from the Andorian Empire stood up, his forearms shaking with emotion. "Ambassador Chen, we must know. How long has your species been protecting us?" Chen stood and walked to the center of the hall. Her footsteps echoed in the silence. 50 years, she said simply. "Since the day we made first contact with your exploration ship. But you never told us about the threats out there," protested Dr. Zen. "We had no idea that things like the Void Hunters existed." Chen's expression was patient but sad. "Would you have believed us? 50 years ago, you thought we were a primitive species from a backwater world. If we had told you about the horrors in dark space, you would have thought we were insane." Representative Gorth growled in frustration. "But we could have helped. Our combined fleets, our technology, could have gotten billions of beings killed," Chen finished gently. "Admiral, your ships are beautiful and efficient. They're perfect for exploring peaceful space and defending against conventional threats. But against the things we fight out there, they would have been worse than useless. They would have been targets." The hall erupted in uncomfortable chatter. It was hard for proud species to admit that their greatest achievements were inadequate. Engineer Colvin spoke up from his section. "Your technology seems so primitive compared to ours. How can crude weapons be more effective than our advanced systems?" Chen smiled for the first time since the crisis began. "That's exactly why they work. We learned something important during our history of warfare on Earth. Sometimes, the simple solution is the best solution. Complex systems can be countered, disrupted, or turned against you. A chunk of metal moving at high speed just follows physics. But how did you know how to fight the Void Hunters?" asked Velashti from the warrior clans. "Because we recognize what they are," Chen replied. "They're predators, extremely dangerous, but predictable in their own way. Earth taught us to understand predators, because we had to become predators ourselves to survive." Dr. Zen's tentacles curled with thought. "You said you've dealt with their kind before. What else is out there?" Quote, Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight that made everyone lean forward. "Things that make the Void Hunters look like minor pests. Reality parasites that feed on the laws of physics. Entities from dimensions where mathematics work differently. Machine intelligences that consume entire star clusters to fuel their calculations. The Void Hunters were just the first to find your sectors. The hall went completely silent. The thought of worse threats than the Void Hunters was terrifying. "How many of you are out there?" whispered Senior Ethereal Zix then. "How many humans are standing guard in the darkness?" "Enough," Chen said simply. "We've been preparing for this since we first understood what the galaxy was like. While your species developed art, philosophy, and elegant technologies, we studied your enemies. We learned their weaknesses. We built weapons and ships specifically designed to kill things that shouldn't exist." "But why?" demanded Senator Crickstall. "Why sacrifice so much to protect people you barely knew?" Chen looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of delegates from dozens of different species. "Because that's what we do," she said. "Humans protect things. It's what Earth taught us. On our world, the strong protect the weak, or everything dies. We learned that lesson over and over again throughout our history." "And now?" asked Admiral Gorth. "What happens now that we know the truth?" Chen considered the question carefully. "Now you have a choice. We can continue to stand guard on the edge of known space, fighting the darkness alone. Or we can work together to build a better defense." "Together?" Dr. Zen asked. "But you said our technology was inadequate." "Your weapons are inadequate for the threats we face," Chen corrected. "But your minds are not. You have knowledge and perspectives that could help us develop better strategies. And some of your technologies, properly adapted, could be useful." The ethereals conferred among themselves in flashes of light, too fast for other species to follow. Finally, Zix then spoke. "We would like to propose something unprecedented in galactic history. We formally request that Sol Sector take primary responsibility for the military defense of the galaxy." The hall erupted in shocked conversation. Species that had never accepted anyone else's authority were volunteering to put themselves under human protection. Chen held up a hand for silence. "We appreciate the offer, but we have conditions." "Name them." Zix then said immediately, "We will protect the galaxy, but we will not be governed by it. Human military units answer to human command. We'll coordinate with your forces, share intelligence, and work together when possible. But when we say, retreat, you retreat. When we say, stay away, you stay away. And when we tell you something is too dangerous for your ships, you believe us." The conditions were harsh, but every delegate knew they had no choice. After what they had seen, none of them wanted to argue with human military judgment. The vote was unanimous. As the session ended, delegates began to leave, chattering excitedly about this new era. But Chen remained behind, looking out through the great windows at the stars. Senior Ethereal Zix then approached her. "Ambassador Chen, may I ask you something?" "Of course. Are you afraid of the things waiting in the darkness?" Chen was quiet for a moment, then smiled. "Every day. Fear keeps us sharp. Fear keeps us alive. Earth taught us that too." "Then how do you keep fighting?" "Because the alternative is worse than being afraid," she said simply. "Someone has to stand watch in the darkness. It might as well be us." A week later, Chen stood on the bridge of a human patrol ship at the edge of known space. Behind her, the galaxy sparkled with the lights of trillions of inhabited worlds. Ahead was the endless dark between the spiral arms, where things that should not exist waited in the cold. Her communication officer looked up from his console. "Admiral, we're detecting spatial distortions in Sector 47. Could be another incursion." Chen nodded calmly. "Set course for intercept. Alert the fleet." As the ship turned toward the darkness, Chen smiled slightly. The galaxy was safe now, under human protection. The civilized species could continue to create beautiful art and elegant technology and peaceful philosophy. And humans would continue to do what they did best, stand guard against the monsters. It was, she thought,